Hi everyone, my name is Bogdan and welcome to Acura Addicted channel, helping you to navigate in the world of automotive repairs, maintenance and reviews. In this episode, I'll be addressing a common MDX issue, a moaning or whining power steering pump. This is actually a widespread issue for a lot of hydraulic power steering equipped vehicles, so this solution is going to be applicable pretty much across the board. If you started to hear this, or similar sound, your power steering pump is probably affected. What's happening is there's air being introduced into the system somewhere that's causing cavitation, hence the annoying sound. It mostly manifests itself around 2000 RPM, so basically most of the time you're driving. Note that if you don't fix it sooner than later, this might damage the power steering pump permanently, so you're going to have to replace it. Luckily, if you manage to repair this in time, it's a really inexpensive, about 20 bucks, and relatively quick fix any DIYer is capable of doing. It's usually one of two or both rubber O-rings that help seal the high-pressure power steering pump output and low-pressure input. They start to let the air in with time as rubber hardens. Depending on your vehicle, it might be easier or harder to replace them. In the case of the second generation MDX, it's really straightforward. Oh, and while I'm on it, I'll also try to flush as much power steering fluid as I can. There are multiple ways to do it. One of them is to use a vacuum pump. That's what I'll attempt to do. Let's roll. Here's a list of tools you need to complete this job. A flathead screwdriver, a vacuum pump with some hoses or at least a turkey baster, a container for disposed steering fluid, new steering fluid. I myself, as many others, recommend Honda Genuine Power Steering Fluid. It's not expensive. Usually a couple of bottles enough. Pliers for removing clamps. A 3/8 inch ratchet. A 10mm socket. A medium extension. A small 10mm wrench. This one is important. I'll explain why later. Paper towels. Never too many. Some old rugs for cleaning any spilled fluid. And believe me, there will be some, no matter how hard you try to avoid it. 2 new rubber O-rings. Some decent lights. Links to everything I used are in the description. Before we start, a bit of a warning. In case you have a remote start, and just for good measure, it's best to disconnect the battery to avoid the car starting when you're messing with the pump. Since I'm not removing the serpentine belt, if someone, like your kid for example, or a remote starter button is pushed accidentally and starts the car, not only you are risking of spraying the steering fluid all over, but you're also risking your fingers. First, I'm going to remove as much fluid as I can from the reservoir. You can use a turkey baster for it, but since I have the vacuum pump, it's going to be an excellent exercise to try it out. Remove the cap, stick the hose in, and start working the pump. Well, it turns out it's not as easy as I thought it would be. At this point, I can already tell that I should have gotten a bigger pump, or at least a pump with a bigger disposal container. Oh well, I'll just keep working it. Wow, that's some dirty fluid. That's a lot of crud. The container is full now, so I'll start disposing of fluid into a bigger container. Let's try that again. Oh boy, I really wish I had a bigger pump. Anyway, I see that the fluid level is now lower than the return line, which means I can now disconnect the return hose and connect my vacuum pump directly to it and get the fluid out. Just unclamp here and remove the hose. With a little persuasion, it's possible, I promise. Let's use the pump again. And again. And again. Looks like that's it. It's mostly air now. Okay, let's disconnect the outlet hose from the reservoir. I'll also remove the reservoir and drain the remaining fluid out of it, as well as clean it up a bit. There, much better. Having the reservoir out also provides more space for operating there. Let's unbolt the high pressure line from the top of the pump. Two 10mm bolts. No huge effort is required to loosen them. Have a rag ready to avoid spilling any fluid. Almost got it. Here's one of the O-rings. Just use the flathead screwdriver to get it off. Now it's the low pressure intake's turn. Although I should have probably done this one first. Remove the hose to allow more room. There's one 10mm bolt holding it in the base here. I couldn't fit even the smallest ratchet with the smallest 10mm head, so here's where that 10mm small wrench comes in handy. Of course, it would have been much easier with the pulley taken off, but I really didn't want to bother with the serpentine belt. You have a very limited space for rotation here, and it's not easy to get the wrench on that bolt. Thankfully, I was able to do it. Just a little nudge, and the bolt is loose. Couple of more awkward turns, and I can use my fingers to take it out. Be careful not to lose the bolt. You might have a hard time tracking it down after. Got it. Get the rag ready, because there will be fluid as soon as you remove this piece. Done. Here's the orange O-ring. It got stuck in the pump. I'm going to use the same small wrench at an angle to remove it. Let's compare the old O-rings and new ones to make sure they are of the same diameter. They are. Now just put everything back in reverse order, starting with the rings. I'll put the orange one directly at the intake here. Looks like everything is back in place now. Check and make sure you haven't left anything in the engine bay that will interfere with the serpentine belt and pump pulley rotating. Let's add some new fluid now. We can add all the way up to the upper line, as outlined on the reservoir. Look how translucent the new fluid looks. Time to start the car. Just a short run for a few seconds to get the new fluid into the system and avoid introducing air. Of course, as soon as I start the engine, the remaining old fluid will mix with the new one and it will become darker. Now let's add more fluid. I will start the car again and let it run for a bit to get the fluid circulating. Hearing the pump moan or whine for a short time during this is normal. Remember, the system is not full of fluid yet. That should suffice. I can't hear whining or moaning anymore. Hopefully, it's gone for good. I suggest checking any spills after shutting the engine off, just to make sure it's all set. The fluid level is likely to decrease in the end of this procedure again, especially when the engine cools off. As the instruction says, top it off to the upper level in the reservoir. I would also recommend to check the level one more time in about a day, to make sure that there are no leaks and that the level is not higher than required. And that's it. Now I admit that not everything went flawlessly, but I'm pretty happy with the result. The whining and moaning is gone, hopefully for a long time. If that hadn't worked, I would have needed to replace the pump, which is although pricey, but will just add another 15 minutes to what was already shown in the video, as you just have to remove the serpentine belt, the pulley, and take out a couple of bolts to swap the pump. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you disliked it, oh well, what can I do? Either way, leave your comments below and hit that subscribe and bell buttons for more videos on this channel. And as always, drive safe, use your turn signals, and remember, anything is possible with the right tools and motivation. See you next time!